Okay, here we are again, everybody. This is slip seat again, and I'm going to go through just a quick startup procedure, how I do it. I'm not going to be going by the checklist or anything like that in this particular one, and may not cover every aspect of it in detail, but just give a flow through as I go through the initial startup, and we'll see where it leads, okay? So, beginning here, we're going to go in and we got to get electrical power to the aircraft. So let's start off with battery power, the inverter switch. You hear it start to buzz, give us a little bit of indications that she's coming to life. So got that going. The next thing that we need is to get the APU running, which is the auxiliary power unit. That's over here to the left of your throttle. You may have to bend your head to get over and see it, but just flick that up and you start to hear the APU cranking on. And the auxiliary power unit is just a small engine that has enough horsepower to then crank up the APU generator to generate more substantial electrical power. Alright, once that is up, we switch on the generator. We do that when the APU gives us at the 100 RPM level, and we're ready to proceed here. So with that done, we now, I generally will go ahead and turn on the radios. You have to have the APU and the generator on to turn on this newest radio suite. That's called the 210, I believe it is. Yes, the ARC 210. And what I've done there is I've also loaded some presets into the mission, and I don't think that that will show up when we go to preset and go to channel 2. Let's see here. Oh. $264. Maybe it is showing up for us. Let's see here. It is. And it should, I'll be able to show it on the actual MFCD later on in just a little bit, okay? But the next thing I do once I get the APU running, I generally will go ahead just because it's noisy and lower the canopy. And right now we're still at the default 100. Is it not doing it? Sorry, I didn't have it clicked. I thought I did. At the 100-degree field of view. So let me just switch that back to 80, which is what I typically like to do. I've moved away from trying to do that 70 degree that I did the previous video on. It's just not working too good for me. So at least not at this moment. Alright, so now that we've got the APU generator running, the canopy's closed, I will switch on the CDU and the EGI. And it starts to crank up the alignment for the navigation alignment system and getting this CDU started basically going through its startup procedure, okay? Next, I'll turn on both MFCDs. After we've got all this APU generator power running, I will click on the SICU, the JTRS, and the IFCC to test. And the IFCC, when you put it just to test, you could go ahead and switch it straight up to on and skip this. I just like going ahead and proceeding with this bit test while everything's cranking up. I'm generally not in a huge hurry. I enjoy this part of the game and just slowly building up by doing the startup. So I let it run through the bit test as some of this other stuff, because this takes a while for the nav system to align. And so I'm not really worried about doing much. While it is testing, I go ahead and zero out my accelerometer,
Pull
which
up.
registers the G-forces that you're pulling throughout
Altitude,
your
altitude.
previous trip. I uncage my backup attitude gauge, and then my bit test is done, so I will hit enter while it is on exit on the UFC. I'll do the select rocker arm down to hit enter again to exit completely out of that and switch the IFCC completely on. Alright? At this stage, because we're not going to load weapons today, or I don't have a flight pan created in any way, we'll do that in a separate video after we get the startup done. I will go ahead and hit load all. What this does is it's going to load everything that it needs. If you had a flight plan, it would be loading that up to the TAD. It would be loading any weapons and their default profiles to the Dismas. But what we're doing today is it's going to be loading, as you can see, and this is new with the new ARC-10 radio, that it's loading any presets that we've done in the mission. So if we go to the COM page, for instance, I think we should see, yes, because what I've done is I renamed the preset channel 2 to VODI, and it was already in there at the 264, which we saw come up here. And so you can go to your COM page and be able to see all the preset channels, and you can change the frequency here. You can modify the name in this screen, in the COM screen, okay? So once that's done, we're going to change our right MFCD to the CDU repeater, and all it is mirroring the screen down below. It's mirroring it up here so you don't have to have your head down. All right. So we've uncaged, we've reset our accelerometer. I also will go ahead and just change the anti-skid and the taxi lights to on, and I will contact the tower at this point. We should be able to use the 210 to do this. We're going to test that out right now. Calling A-10C, and we're going to request startup.
Pig 1-1, request startup. Pig 1-1, Minbody, clear for startup.
Alright, they've given us the authority to do that, permission to do that, so we're going to start with the left engine by moving the throttle from the off to the idle position. And we will start to see these gauges. Our hydraulic pressure start to rise, our oil pressure start to rise, the RPMs of the engine will come up, it should come up to about 50 or so, and then the temperature should rise as well, all giving us indication. You'll also see over on the light panel, the instrument light panel, that the engine start cycle is lit. Okay, so we'll wait for that to finish. I'll go ahead and exit out of the radio. I'm not going to worry with adjusting any lights in this session. You can do that as to your heart's content. The nav is aligned. It says 4.0, 0.8. This is your indication, plus it is flashing INS nav ready. And so at that point we will just hit the nav, the OSB by the nav, and that is basically setting us up to the point we can hit the EGI and the steer point. And our left engine has spooled up. Everything seems to be good. We're at a reasonable temperature. It's about 55, at 550 on the temp here. And the fan, percent of RPM is right at 25. Hydraulic pressure and oil pressure all looks good, so we're ready to move on to the right engine. Before that, I will typically, you've got enough hydraulic power that you can move your air surfaces, so you can check your controls and see that your ailerons and your rudders working properly, and then we can go ahead and switch to the right engine and get that engine cycle started as well. Okay, we've got the nav done. Usually when the nav is finished is when I go ahead and change all these SAS switches to on, and I do the takeoff trim and get it set. and turn the EAC on. Okay, I've already got my hand down there, so I will go ahead and arm the ejection handle. I do not arm any of my weapons at this stage. And the only thing I do on the CWS side and the countermeasure or CMS side is these three and turn it to standby. I don't turn jammer on until we get out to the IP. That's the same time I turn this on when we do our fence in type procedures. Okay. Okay. Once it gets up and the engine cycle light goes out, and I've double checked everything looks good, and I've got a good engine startup. All my pressures are the same. My hydraulic pressure looks good. You can do part of the official startup, and I do this most times. I hold the brake and I do a real quick, like 1, 2, 3 movement of the throttle to get it to basically 80% RPM, and then back down to 0. So it's a real quick movement of just brake. I hold the brake, go to 80 and back. Just a full throttle and back. Okay. That's just a part of the overall procedure. You're supposed to also do another thing when you do the speed brakes. You're supposed to do the speed brakes, but then also do a procedure where you engage your speed brake emergency retract, make sure that it doesn't operate. We're not going to do that in this session today. Okay, now that we've got both engines up and everything is fine, I don't need the APU anymore, so I will switch the APU generator back off, and I will turn the APU itself off. All right, everything else is good. We're just about ready. We've got anti-skid ready to go. All of our navigation is good. I don't turn on pitot heat, which is heating this tube right here, because it can freeze in certain temperatures, so, and at certain altitudes. So I wait to turn this on until we get to just about ready to take off once we're on the runway. Other than that, I don't do it. And you can check your gauges over here and see that they are completely gone, which is a good indication that you are finished with your startup and you are very close to being able to go. I will also check the flaps to make sure they are working, and you can do this by going on the outside of the vehicle and see that they are in fact extending and retracting as they should. We've checked the speed brakes, close the canopy. Now I like to wait, I know they do this ahead of time on the checklist. They do it pretty early. I like to do the lamps because they're already all off. So I like to do the lamp test at this point to see that everything lights up. That's just my preference. And then fire detect, same way. Press that button to make sure you got it. I like to see my fuel on the all internal. I just like to see the whole fuel package, and then I do the test to make sure that it is reading and doing accurate. And then finally, you can do the oxygen test by holding this down. Once it gets to about 2, it will start flashing right there, oxygen low. Okay. And we are all good. The next stage would be to contact them, request the taxi to runway.
Big 1-1. Request taxi to runway.
Activate our nose steering.
Big 1-1. Command body, clear to taxi to runway 30.
And then we would be on our way and ready to taxi, okay, which we're not going to do today. So that's the quick rundown of how I start the A-10C2. It starts to be second nature as you practice it, and you just get this stuff ingrained in your memory. I will oftentimes go ahead, and if I know I'm about to taxi, I'll switch my dial over to flight plan. I'll also put this on position so that I can change from the indicated airspeed to the ground speed on my CDU, so I know I'm not going too fast as I taxi. And then I'm ready to go, ready to hit the air. Okay, so practice makes perfect, and not to say that I'm perfect. I do it my own way, which makes sense, and I can remember most everything that I need to do, and that's just my flow, kind of a around the cockpit view of how Slipsea does the startup on the A-10. Okay, so if you do things different, I'm sure there is. If you the correct way would be to follow the checklist. Right? That's what checklists are for. Is to follow them jot by jot, tittle by tittle, so that you don't miss anything. But and a nice handy reference to be able to do that is to put the uh, checklist on your kneeboard pages. You can do that. There's all kind of checklists out there that have been created by the awesome members of this community, and you could do your startup list right on your kneeboard if you so desired, so that you could have it right alongside you, or you can have a physical copy of it and follow it. Certainly, following the checklist is a good way to get most of it ingrained in your memory, and so that you can commit it there and be able to do it in a pretty efficient manner and get started as quickly as possible. But I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave a comment, and we'll see you next time, where we'll go from this to adding some weapons and taxiing, maybe taking off and landing. But until the next time, Slipseed out. See you.